Hey, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of Tell Your Story. Let me get this all set up and ready to go. Okay, my name is Todd Nesloni. I am the author of the book Stories from Web, which this entire series is based after. And the series is inspired by my mother, Sally Ross. And so we are on episode 3, and I'm about to bring on our guest. Just to let everybody know who's been watching, the whole point of Tell Your Story is for me to invite people on to share their story, but more importantly, to share the story of someone else who has impacted their own story. I'm so thrilled about the guests we have today, and let me see if I can get them added in correctly. To get this up and rolling. I do want to give a big thank you as well to everyone who's watched the previous 2 episodes. Today was an exciting day as we broke 10,000 views on episode 1 of Tell Your Story. So that's pretty exciting. But they're here! So I am so thrilled to welcome this week's guests. I've been advertising that we have Josh Stamper, but we also have a special guest joining him, and that is his wife, Leslie. So thanks for being here, guys. So let's go ahead. Let me start with you introducing yourself, who y'all are, what, and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll jump into some things.
My name's Joshua Stamper.
I don't know if I can't hear you anymore. I don't know if talk again. Let me see. Now I can hear you. It was kind of breaking up a little bit. The video's fine, but the audio.
Okay. So my name's Stamper. I'm in Plano, Texas, and
I'm hearing every other word.
how about now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Sorry about that. You're gonna get close personal Joshua Stamper here.
That's fine. It's still a little bit choppy, but I think I can hear it okay. So go ahead.
Let me get a microphone. Would that be better?
No, it's good now.
Okay. So my name's Joshua Stamper, and I'm an administrator in Plano, Texas, and I've been an administrator for 5 years. And this is my lovely wife, and we're going to be talking through our story as foster parents and adoptive parents.
So you've been in education for how long, Josh?
Oh goodness, this is my 11th year in education.
And so Josh and I actually met on social media and then met face to face a little over a year ago at a conference, and hit it off and have been great friends. And through that, I've kind of been able to learn a little bit about his family story and kind of what they've been doing to not only just take care of some great kids, but also grow their own family. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you guys on today, is because I just love the story and that risk of jumping out there to do something that is a little different. So tell us a little bit about your journey with foster care and adoption.
Sure. So about 6 years ago,
the sound is gone completely again. We're going to get this to work, I promise.
All right, how about now?
I can hear you, yeah.
I'm going to get real close. You can see all the white in my beard.
There we go.
So about 6 years ago, we started looking at our family as far as the dynamics and looking at our original. We were done. We were just going to have two kiddos. We had a boy and a girl. We thought, we're done. Kind of felt called to look at in our family. So we didn't know what that looked like to begin with, but Leslie did a lot of research and looking at domestic adoption, international adoption, and then also foster care. And so just with our family, it made sense financially and with time that foster care was probably the best option for us.
So give us a little bit of background on what foster care looks like. So do you have to go through a whole application process and get approved for all of that, right?
So you have to be licensed in foster. You can do that in Texas.
Josh, I'm not sure if it's your Wi-Fi or what it is, but the audio is terrible. I mean, it's not a volume thing. It's a choppy in and out thing. I don't know if it's the microphone on your phone or what. Because, like, I can't hear y'all at all right now.
But so
I can't. We'll get this working. I know you were having problems with your phone before, Josh. We should have gone with your wife's phone to begin with.
yeah, that was an option.
This is real life, everybody. This is how technology works. It goes in and out, and it works when it needs to, and sometimes doesn't. So, see, I can hear now. All right, sure that.
All right, how does that work?
Oh, it's like a whole nother world.
Okay, we'll be real close here, sharing a microphone.
There we go. Okay. So you were talking about licensing and in Texas?
So, yes, foster families are licensed. In the state of Texas, you can be licensed either directly through CPS, and that is a separate branch that does licensing of foster family than the branch of CPS that does removal and placements of children. Or there's independent foster care agencies that you can become licensed with. So it's an in-depth process. It requires a home study. It requires training in psychotropic medication, trauma-based care of the kiddo, behavioral management, all of that stuff. And it requires annual training as well. The process takes around, 4 to 12 months, just depending on how motivated you are. And yeah, so that's how we started, was by going to an information session where we could learn about different agencies and also just about adoption in general. And it taught us just about international adoption, domestic, foster care. And I think our hearts were just a little bit broken about the needs that's really right here in our own neighborhood. And just meeting a need here in our communities.
So I know every family story is a little bit different with the people who go through this, but knowing you already had 2 children at home, were they involved in part of those conversations of deciding whether or not to become a foster family?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, that was a big part of it. We kind of had to look at the family structure and what we wanted. Some families, they take any age range. We decided that we wanted our biological children to be the oldest. So from the beginning, we looked at going, whatever I was Landon, our second oldest, whatever his age and younger. And then that's kind of expanded as the children have gotten older.
Right.
So for us, we looked at the younger kiddos to begin with.
And they were 2 and 3 when we started the process.
Okay.
So we've always involved them in the decision of, are we, with each placement, are we going to do this again? And are we going to continue? But it's an age appropriate communication level.
Yeah.
When we started, they didn't understand a whole lot.
It's kind of hard to ask a 3-year-old, hey, do you want to jump into this? So talk to me about, now you have fostered how many kids now?
5.
5, and you've adopted 3?
Yeah.
So talk to me about a little bit of that process of, now obviously with fostering, was your goal always eventually to adopt them, or were you just thinking of fostering at the beginning?
Well, that's a little bit different. So, the whole goal is reunification of the child. So when you receive a child, the goal is always that it goes back to the family with foster care. So
or extended family. If not parents.
So that's kind of where our heart has to be. We got kind of deep into a process with potentially adopting a child, and it went a different direction suddenly based on the judge's decision, and that was just heartbreaking for us because we kind of broke that barrier down in our mind and had this mindset that this is going to be our child, and making plans for the future. And so that was quite devastating of a process. And we kind of took a little break after that. But for the most part, when you receive the child into your home, the whole process is about reunification. There's obviously a judge involved and an action plan for the parent to go through services. But if it gets to the point where a child is removed, then that's when they ask us if we want to go further with adoption. And for us, of course, we said yes.
So you've adopted 3 boys now. So tell us a little bit about those 3 boys.
They're boys. They're crazy.
Well, I think not Mila and Landon are biological children, and they are both precious, and they're real caretakers. And Mila's a little mommy, and Landon is just very driven and detail oriented. So they were a really good place, like personality wise, like they were really good kiddos to then also add to the family. And then our 6-year-old is just the sweetest.
Yeah,
like
precious.
he has the dearest heart. He's the sweetest and probably like the hardest worker that I know. He just, I mean, oh, he's so dear. And our 4-year-old is our wild child. He is a little Tasmanian devil and no fear, needs like constant input from people, doesn't like to be alone, and just is always moving, always talking, always like at your side.
And he's got like best friends. Anyone he meets, it's right away a friend of his.
Yeah, every stranger gets a hug. And then our little guy is, he's my baby, and he's trying hard not to be. Like, he's growing up, and I'm not ready for him to leave this stage, but he's...
I think mom's having a tougher time than the kid.
Right.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, when you grow your family at all, even through biological children, there's things that you learn about yourself, that you learn about the kids. What do you think is the biggest lesson that you guys have learned through fostering and adopting? What have those boys taught you, or the process in general?
Probably not to be so selfish, to be honest. I think that's been my biggest struggle, is to, because I'm a logistics person, and that's how I'm as an administrator too. It's, there's a vision, but there's also the planning piece to it. And so for me, it's always been looking at the logistics, how big the car has to be, or how many rooms and beds and that type of thing. And so that logical side of my mind, I kind of have to get past that to just say, we do have the resources, we do have the ability to take on more kiddos, and to get past it. I think for Leslie, I mean, she's definitely the heart of the family. So, she's constantly looking at adding, because there's such a great need out there. And so for me personally, I think it's just it'd be nice to, go on a trip somewhere, just the 2 of us. But I think when we're older, looking back, we're going to see that in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't really matter. Our family is what's the most important thing, and what we can add to these kids' lives is way, way more important.
Right.
I think it has pushed us, I mean, kind of like what Josh said, pushed us out of a comfort zone that we had really built for ourselves, and getting out of that comfort zone hasn't been a bad thing. Like, we've learned a lot of resiliency. We've seen a lot of resiliency built in our big kids. And we've also learned a lot ourselves, probably expanding our worldview. We've learned a ton about poverty and race relations and mental illness and
Trauma.
Right.
Yeah. And we have all of that in our home now, like those are issues that we experience day to day, and it requires just constantly learning more. And, it really has expanded our worldview.
Both of you just actually, I think yesterday it was released, y'all wrote a blog post together about the effects of trauma and all that. Talk to me about how that kind of ties into all this.
Well, we've been talking about writing something together for a while, just because the more that we do research on trauma, it's just such a prevalent aspect of education and our community. I think that's a subject that people realize is there, but there's not a whole lot of conversation going on about it. And I know Todd and myself, obviously because we're in the school system, we get to see these behaviors and some things that are changing with emotion, like the emotional health of students. And seen on our end as far as it being in our house every day, and some of the effects that it's had on our boys. I just think that conversation needs to be occurring more often, because there are certain strategies that work with a functional, developed brain, and then there's those same strategies don't work with a trauma-developed brain.
Right.
And so just looking at maybe opening up some minds or views as to what potentially can be changed with discipline, with social emotional learning. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going out there, but I think as for the educational side, that's kind of what I wanted to put out there. But then also asking Leslie to put her side of things, because she's in that reality every day as you know, the mom, and she gets to see a different perspective. So I kind of wanted her view also.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love the post. I thought it was a really great post, and I love that y'all wrote it together. So that was really cool too. So, Josh, where can people check that out if they want to check that out? Well,
just connect with me on Twitter on Joshua _Stamper. No, that's confusing. But on there, there's a link on there with my blog.
Awesome.
But that's definitely where to check it out.
So I know that there may be people watching who may be interested in becoming foster parents or adoptive parents. What would you say is something you wish people would have told you before you got into things?
I'll let you answer.
Oh, I don't. I would say that it is incredibly hard. It'll break your heart wide open, and it is absolutely worth it.
Right. I love that. You know, this is something that's always been near and dear to my heart, because I've talked about often that, you know, I wanted to go into social work as my first career. And one of the reasons why I decided education instead of social work is because it was very difficult for me to separate myself from the kind of things that I would be dealing with as a social worker that I wouldn't necessarily be able to solve, but I would be a part of the solution of being solved. But anyway, if somebody is interested in doing this, where would you suggest them go to first for more information or to get help on adopting or foster care?
To start the licensure process, like if they wanted to become...
Yeah, or if they want to learn more information, what are some places y'all go to? Or
a good place to start would be whatever county they live in any state that they live in, to go to the county CPS, DFPS website, Child Protective just to straight up Google Child Protective Services in the county where they live, because licensure usually begins in the county.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we had to have not only a home visit, but then also, you know, we have to work with the city as far as the fire department coming out. And I mean, there's a certain process that is going to need to be researched. So that's a great start. Also, you know, we were licensed through a private agency. The agency we worked with was Covenant Kids, but there's a whole host of organizations that will help with getting someone licensed. So there's education then with that too, which kind of came with the trauma-based learning that was in the blog. But there's a lot of other things that go with that process that it will need to be coordinated.
Now, obviously, when you get involved with something like this, whether it's foster care or adoption, you learn a lot more of the realities of what really goes on and statistics and things like that. What has been the most glaring thing that you learned that you had no idea about before beginning this process, whether it's with statistics or the kids or the families or the process or any of that?
The sheer number of removals that are happening, and those are validated removals. You know, there could be in the state of Texas, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but there could be over 100,000, the number is over 100,000 referrals. Those are just phone calls that CPS goes and then investigates. But when you talk about the actual removals, those are warranted. Abuse, neglect is happening within the home. Removal has been warranted. The number is staggering. And that's really, I think, the place that started that called us to, you know, not domestic, not international. We're going to focus in on foster care.
And so when you focus in on foster care, obviously they have to be local kids and families, right? This isn't a thing where somebody like comes in from out of state and you foster them, or.
Well, our three boys, each one came from a different county, so.
But all right here in the Dallas
all,
area.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I mean, they are local, but at the same point, they are kind of spread out. But you're right, not out of state. To go also, I think, if folks aren't willing to open up their home, but to bringing in a foster child, I think there's other opportunities too, and I think that's
Right.
one area that is a world that I didn't even know existed, which was the respite care process. I know a lot of our friends, they know that foster care isn't for them, but they have a heart for serving and helping out. And so I think that's a wonderful opportunity for folks to check out too. And that process, you can probably speak more to that, but if a foster parent, for instance, is going out of town for a couple of days and the foster child needs care, someone would go through the process to become respite. And so they would take that child for those couple of days and help out that foster family. And so it's not a long-term thing, but there's a huge need for that and for foster families.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've heard different things about foster care, but never actually being involved in it with myself. Can you walk us through what the process is? Because isn't it like they only stay with you a day or a few hours to begin with? Or how does that work?
So at the point, and I mean, in the state of Texas, we're all mandatory reporters. It doesn't matter what your job is. So at the point where there is a referral that goes into the CPS hotline and they have decided that that is worth pursuing. Once they have done their own investigation and deem that the child needs to be removed, CPS has 4 hours to identify a foster family. Doesn't mean the child has to be in the foster family's home within 4 hours, but their goal is within 4 hours of removal to identify a foster family, which is complicated by foster family shortages, but that's their goal. So at that point, as the foster family, we would get a phone call for an emergency placement. And if we say yes, and it's all approved through our side and CPS's side, then the child comes and they'll be in our home in a couple of hours.
Wow. So you could just get a phone call one evening if you're a foster family and then just say, hey, we really need somebody. Can you do this in a couple hours? And then you would have a kid in a couple hours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were emergency licensed. So we got a call at 11 o'clock at night and we had a child
at 2 a.m.
with a bag of some diapers and a couple clothes. And that was our first placement.
Yeah.
And so what does the process look like from there? Is it they stay with you until something is figured out, or?
They stay.
Yeah.
So initially it's a temporary removal, and that temporary court order lasts for 14 days. So they have 14 days to CPS completes the rest of their investigation. And then there's a hearing at 14 days. They present everything to the judge, and the judge makes a decision of, yes, this child needs to remain in foster care while the parents work their service plan, or no, they don't, they can be returned. At that point, there's court visits about every 3 months, and the foster or the biological family has about a year to work their service plan and see if they can make the appropriate changes in their lives in order to make their home safe for the children to return.
And during that process, is there a communication between the child and their biological family, or is it kind of like you need to get your act together and then you can have communication, or how does that kind of work?
There's visits. Visits are court ordered. They're usually every week or twice a week, 1 to 2 hours. And as the biological family works their service plan and are successful, those visitations can be lengthened.
Are you present during the visitations?
Mm-mm.
No.
Okay. Because,
Nope.
one of the things that would be difficult that I think would be so difficult as a foster parent would be, you take in this child who comes from a place of trauma, which is the whole reason they're being removed. But then because even children who come from trauma, they still yearn for and long to be with their biological family.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to know that, like, mom, for example, comes to visit, but then she has to go away because she's getting her stuff together. I mean, I could just see that having to tear the kid away, or having that be really hard on the foster family as well.
I would say hard on the educators too.
Yeah.
You know, because if that kiddo is leaving school to go to a visit, it's possible that the hours leading up to that visit or upon return from the visit, because sometimes, you know, if the visit can only take place during the day, the kid could be leaving school
Right.
and then returning to school to go and visit. And I would anticipate, both as the foster family and as the educator, to see increased behaviors before and after.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, somebody asked on here, they said, can you explain the term service plan and how those are kind of developed?
It's court ordered.
Yep.
And it is based upon removal. It could be anything from anger management, drug treatment. What else have we seen? Things like they need to get a job, they need to have a car, they need to have a place to live. If it's a domestic violence type of situation, they need to leave the abuser and secure housing independently. They need to have childcare so that when they return to work, then there is childcare for their kids.
Right. So, being involved with the different situations that you've been involved in, now, obviously you foster and adopted, but you've also fostered other kids that you didn't adopt. The kids you have are younger, but do you see a lot of? Let me see how I can word how I'm trying to ask this. I mean, it would seem to me like it would be also super difficult on a child to watch their parents go through a process of trying to get them back, but then not be able to get their life together enough for it to happen. Once that year passes, or however long, and that biological family does not abide by what the court says, is visitation, does that still happen? Are they cut out of the life? Like, what does that look like?
If termination of parental rights occurs, then that's a severance of relationship.
Yeah. But as the child's older, I mean,
they can choose to reach out to them.
Yeah.
So the older the child is and the longer they're with their parent, obviously the connection is much greater. And so that need to be with that parent is also greater. So that's when you get to see some of the behaviors like running away or trying to find opportunities to be with that parent. And so
unsanctioned communication,
right.
Social media and phones and everything. They can keep in contact.
Yep.
This is such an intriguing thing to me because I work in an environment where CPS is involved quite often. And, as an educator who is not involved in the foster or adoption process, when you think about these, you don't always think about every little element that goes into what happens to these kids. You may think that like, oh, well, CPS is involved, they're just investigating something. And it's like, no, there could be all these other steps that are happening in this child's life that they may not ever say at school. But just like you said, Leslie, about maybe one of their sanctioned visits in the middle of the day and that anxiety leading up to it, and then the frustration afterwards potentially could really inhibit a lot of different things, not only emotionally but academically, of them not performing the way they need to be because of just this emotional distress that they're under. How do you find the strength to continually be that rock for those kids? I mean, I guess it's probably no different than your own children, right? When they go through.
No, I mean, that's the biggest surprise is once they come into your care, they're a part of your family, and you just love on them as much as you possibly can, and it happens quickly as far as the connection and the bond that you have with that child, and it. When the placement does change, that's why it is so heart-wrenching as a foster parent, because you have invested, your love and your time with that child, and you do find that they are a part of the family, and so that's why we feel very blessed to have 3 of the 5 children stay with us, because they're no different than our bios. I mean,
so I have a question then about
they're our family.
When you foster a child for so long, obviously you're going to grow attached to them and you're going to connect with them. How do you handle the separation when they go back to be with their biological family? Do foster families maintain any kind of contact at all, or is it just kind of like, nope, your job was just to watch them while they got their time together, they are back with their family now? Like, how do you deal with that? Because to me it would feel like almost a death in some ways, like a complete loss of somebody you had completely welcomed in as your own.
There can be ongoing relationship. That's really something that is special when that does occur. Because even though we're not there for visitation, like that's supervised by CPS, we may be transporting the child to their visitation. So there may be some opportunity to see the biological parents and meet them at drop-off and pick up a visitation, or at court if the foster parents choose to attend court. So there is opportunity, and I know of some really great stories where foster parents ended up really mentoring the biological parents and helping them in their success. And then moving forward, having just a really positive relationship of, they could babysit the kiddo when, the biological parent needed that, or just have just an ongoing relationship. I think when it does occur, it's really special.
So the last question I want to leave you with is, this series is called Tell Your Story, and it's about us telling the stories of others and how they've impacted our own stories. So the last question I want to ask is, your three adopted children, what has each one of them taught you the most individually? So each one of the boys, what has each one of them taught you by their own personalities and their own quirks?
I think, oh, that's so hard.
Yeah, I know.
I think with our 6-year-old, I learned not just specifically from him, but from his whole situation. I just learned how much just his family was really set up for failure. Mm-hmm. And that goes back, 2 generations. Right. If there had been more services available and supports in place, a different outcome might have been possible. Right. And so that really, I think, helped me as a foster family moving forward, instead of having an us-them mentality, or, we're the good guys and they failed, of seeing foster care more as this is an opportunity to support and assist a family in need.
I love that.
What about with
Aiden?
Yeah.
That boy's just pure joy.
He really is.
We always talk about, we don't know how life would be without him. I think with all the boys, just joy in general is probably been the thing, because they come from just this trauma background. You wouldn't be able to tell. They go through each day just with pure joy. And I think that's the thing that, for myself, I can appreciate so much, because they have some difficulties that they're working through, and they just have this spirit of, we're just gonna keep going, and it doesn't really phase them, and that's,
they have to work harder at life, for sure.
Yeah, for sure, and they just have this great personality. Yeah. And joy. I just don't know how to explain it, and they're such a blessing to us. But they just keep on going, like it's nothing, and that's just amazing to us.
I love it. Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to say thank you both so much for the work that you do in kids' lives, but also with the work with foster care and adoption. And I know as those kids grow older, and as potentially you foster or adopt even more one day, maybe, that you're affecting so many lives.
She's trying.
But I thank you for coming on and kind of sharing the story of your family and your journey through these things, as I know it's so interesting to me and something that I haven't been able to experience. And so I love that y'all are brave enough to get out there and tell your story. So thank you for today. And I guess we'll chat with everybody next week at 4 o'clock for next week's guest. Y'all have a great evening.
Thanks, Don.